some of these Haitian migrants are either taking pets or wild animals and eating them.
In the park, grabbing up ducks by their neck and cutting their head off and walking off with them.
But it is so unsafe. I have men that cannot speak English in my front yard screaming at me, throwing mattresses in my front yard, throwing trash in my front yard.
Welcome to No Border, No Country. Judge Matt O'Brien. Just when I think we've covered every crazy story about this immigration crisis, along comes something that you couldn't have written in your imagination. We've got a story out of Springfield, Ohio that's gone viral here with Haitian migrants settling in this community in massive numbers. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
So apparently the federal government sent about 20,000 Haitian migrants all at once to the small town of Springfield, Ohio. And either the government failed to consider what was going to happen when they all got there, or didn't work with the refugee resettlement authorities to try and get these people on a stable footing. They just showed up. And so now there's reports that they're sleeping on people's lawns and all kinds of other crazy stuff that I'm sure we'll get into.
Now, a lot of people in this country can testify to this. This sort of thing is happening all over the country, in communities big and small. But what made this story jump out is some of the reports that these residents are talking about, namely that some of these Haitian migrants are either taking pets or wild animals and eating them.
Yeah, so according to the testimony from people who showed up at a town meeting that was held about this, they're grabbing the ducks and geese out of the ponds and using them as a food source. That may strike people as strange, and I'm sure a lot of people would discount that and say, oh, it's xenophobia or it's just urban legends. But that actually happened in my hometown, north of Boston, and it happened in Boston. In Boston, a number of the swans went missing. And in my town, I had problems with them taking the, when I say them, I mean Haitian migrants that were resettled in the town, as well as Vietnamese and Cambodian migrants taking ducks and geese off of the local ponds and taking them home and cooking them up as a feast.
So these aren't just random reports. There was a town hall meeting in Springfield last month, and one by one, all these residents came up with these stories. So let's take a look at these real quick. I'd like to get some of your reaction to this. Let's take a look at this first one here.
I'm done with what I'm seeing. It is so unsafe in my neighborhood anymore. I have the homeless that were trying to camp out, and I have made concessions with them, and I try to help them the best I can to keep them from trying to squat on my property. But it is so unsafe. I have men that cannot speak English in my front yard screaming at me, throwing mattresses in my front yard, throwing trash in my front yard. And I can't. Look at me, I weigh 95 pounds. I couldn't defend myself if I had to. My husband is elderly, and last night, after living in this home for 45 years, he said, Noelle, guess what? It's time to pack up and move. He said, we can't do this anymore. He said, it's killing both of us mentally. I don't understand what you expect of us as citizens. I mean, I understand they're here under temporary protected status, and you're protecting them, and I understand that our city services are overwhelmed and understaffed. But who's protecting us? If we're protecting them, who's protecting me? I want out of this town. I am sorry. Please give me a reason to stay.
So, Matt, you've got to have a heart of stone not to be moved by this woman. I mean, she's very sincere. Does it sound like she's play acting or faking this or making up stories?
No, not at all. And it doesn't sound like this is a case of xenophobia. It sounds like this is a case of there are people, doesn't matter who they are or where they're from, committing crimes. They're trespassing on her property. She said they're putting mattresses on the front lawn. Who wants a bunch of strangers sleeping on mattresses on their front lawn? And you just wake up and find this one day. And of course, this is the federal government being irresponsible. The Biden administration has let these people in. There's absolutely no reason that any of these people should have been let into the U.S. just because they showed up. And most of them probably don't qualify for asylum because asylum involves persecution by a government, like the way Soviet dissidents were persecuted. It's not a catch-all for people that are experiencing what in immigration law is called general conditions of civil strife. There's an economic crisis, political crisis, even a civil war in your country. That is not a basis for getting asylum. For an individual who has come here seeking asylum to actually receive asylum, they have to show that they were persecuted on account of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And if you can't demonstrate that, you're not eligible for asylum.
Now, she referenced the fact that a lot of these Haitian migrants have this TPS designation. Tell us in layman's terms, what does that mean?
So temporary protected status is in a way like asylum light. And what it does is it gives the federal government a way for people who are in the country already to be allowed to stay, even if their visas are on the verge of expiring, or unfortunately, even if they're illegally present in the country. It allows them to remain here when there is a natural disaster, massive economic crisis, political crisis of some sort. The thing is, temporary protected status generally applies to people who are here. It's not a status you've specifically come to the United States to get. And so the Biden administration, just like it is abusing its parole authority, is now abusing temporary protected status. The other thing that our viewers and listeners should understand is temporary protected status has never been temporary. Over the last 3 decades that I've been involved in immigration law and policy, I've never seen anybody rescind a temporary protected status designation. I've seen them extended multiple times. And so you have people that came here in the 90s because of the hurricanes that ravaged the Caribbean and parts of South America during, I think it was between 95 and 98 sometime. Those people are still here. All of those islands and all of those countries that were affected by the weather phenomena have recovered. They've rebuilt, and yet the individuals who supposedly couldn't go back because their house was ruined in a hurricane are still here in the United States.
So it sounds like this is just another hustle for the government to funnel more foreign nationals into this country with no intention of sending them back.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Unbelievable.
It's an effort to funnel people into the U.S., ignoring the immigration law. That's the key part. I mean, it's bad enough that they're attempting to funnel people in here for a variety of different reasons, but they're completely ignoring the Immigration and Nationality Act. And this is a massive problem in the United States because, one, the federal government is bound by the Immigration and Nationality Act. But all of these cities who have declared themselves welcoming cities or sanctuary jurisdictions are also bound by the Immigration and Nationality Act. And they can't just ignore it because they dislike it.
Now, I've seen reports that the majority of these Haitian migrants in Springfield came to the country illegally initially and then were granted the TPS status. Is that correct, or have you heard that?
Yeah, my understanding is the vast majority of them scheduled their illegal admission on the CBP-1 app, which was never intended to be used that way. Yeah. It wasn't Expedia for illegal aliens when it first started. And that the government is granting them TPS because there was, I think there's several existing TPS designations for Haiti. I'm not sure what time periods they cover. And then I think there was a new one due to the fact that Haiti is essentially falling apart. They have a cannibal gang leader running the country basically now like a warlord. It's very, very Mad Max Road Warrior kind of situation over there right now.
There's a lot of angles to this story that we'll dive into some of them, but I wanted to watch this second clip. This is another resident of Springfield talking about this. This is the one I think that garnered a lot of the attention because he amplified these claims about the animals being eaten. Let's watch that.
You guys are just sitting up there in suits or something. Like, I really challenge you guys to get out here and do something. These Haitians are running into trash cans. They're running into buildings. They're running into... They flipping cars in the middle of the street. And I don't know how, like, y'all can be comfortable with this. Like, I don't know, like, who's getting paid from it. I honestly feel like someone's getting paid from it in the background. You got a bunch of people on a bus getting dropped off at a gas station to come down here. I know a single mom that FaceTimed me this morning at the welfare office that really need something. And it's nothing but immigrants over there. They're in the park grabbing up ducks by their neck and cutting their head off and walking off with them and eating them. Like, and it's going to get bigger and it's only going to get worse. And y'all sitting up there in these chairs, all y'all need to get out here and do something. Y'all making hundreds of $1,000s. Y'all need to put on a t-shirt and some Crocs, and then y'all need to come out here in these streets and y'all need to go out here and I'm out here before the police is. Like, y'all need to do something, bro. Y'all really got to stand on business. Y'all getting paid all this money just to wear a suit and sit in a chair. I think it's crazy, bro. That's where they come from and that's what they do. That's their country. I don't know what they got going on over there, but they can't do that over here. And if y'all just getting paid from it and then y'all ain't doing nothing about it, I think that's super weird, bro. Y'all got to stand on business. Y'all got to really, like, step up. Like, it's lame, bro. Like, for real.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
So Matt, that's a pretty wild claim, but like you said, based on your experience, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
No, not by a long shot. I mean, this has happened before, and if you pore over enough news articles, go into the archives, you'll see evidence of it having happened in the past. But the other point that this guy made that I think was great, and the older woman who was testifying about the plight of her and her husband, I think made this point very eloquently as well. What are these cities doing in order to deal with these problems? I mean, I'm presuming Springfield, Ohio has a police department, or it is somehow covered by a county sheriff's department. And it seems to me that if you have people trespassing, then you arrest them for trespassing.
Now, you've got this situation, and this is not a good look for the Biden administration's amnesty plans. I mean, this is just a community being overrun. You've got criminal activity. You've got animal cruelty. You've got all kinds of things. What do you think the knee-jerk reaction of the anti-borders crowd would be to this?
Well, they're going to say it's racism.
Yeah. Bingo. Yeah.
And, I think it's interesting because this is, I mean, obviously, to anyone who can see, the two people talking about this in the town hall meeting, one of them was not Caucasian.
Yes.
And we don't know what the ethnicity of the older white lady was.
Yes.
So this isn't racism. The distinction is being drawn between U.S. citizens and people who are not citizens. And the job of the U.S. government and of all the state and local governments, including the government of Springfield, Ohio, is to protect the citizens of the United States. It says it right in the Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence. Job of the government is to protect the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Well, there's not a whole lot of liberty and happiness going around Springfield, Ohio at this point, and it's only a matter of time before this results in loss of life. And, we're now getting to the point where it's beyond the ability of law enforcement agencies to try and deal with this stuff because, one, they're getting overwhelmed, but number two, because of this whole woke PC ideology and the defund the police movement. If you're a police officer, there may be reasons why you don't want to actively be involved in trying to arrest migrants. Nonetheless, what I said earlier goes. I mean, I'm presuming that there is some law enforcement in Springfield, Ohio, and that it ought to try and restore law and order.
About that reaction I mentioned, you're familiar with an organization called the Haitian Bridge Alliance. I believe we've got some history
Yes.
with them. Yeah, so it sounds like this is a typical open borders legal defense fund type of organization.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
They commented on this, and this was in the New York Post. An attorney from the Haitian Bridge Alliance said, "This is the same old anti-black playbook that we've seen for hundreds of years in Ohio being rolled out to divide and create hate, especially around election time." Really?
Well, I mean, Brian, this is absurd, and I'm very familiar with the Haitian community. My first job out of law school was working for the Immigration and Naturalization Service in Miami, and they didn't have a lot of Haitian Creole speakers. I already spoke fluent French. So they assigned me a bunch of the Haitian cases. And I eventually learned enough Haitian Creole to be able to conduct an immigration inspection or an immigration interview in Creole. And, by and large, Haitians are wonderful people. They work hard, they go to church, they try and make a life in America. I got to know the woman who owned the Haitian bookstore and newsstand down in Miami, who was a wonderful older lady, absolute pleasure to talk to. And I worked with a bunch of immigration officers who were originally from Haiti and had become naturalized U.S. citizens. The problem right now is Haiti is a mess. It has descended into complete disorder. There's no longer a functioning civil authority. And, when you have a cannibal warlord running your country, conditions are usually not good. So I understand why people want to come here. But the problem is when there's a mass exodus from a place like that, and the government of the United States is not bothering to take the time to background check people, to engage in proper vetting, there's absolutely no way to know who came to the United States. So I'm sure that there are a large number of people who came here just looking for protection and want to raise their kids in a calm and peaceful environment. But from what's going on in Ohio, it sounds like there's also a lot of people who were, criminals or gang members when they were in Haiti that are coming here and thinking because the Biden administration invited them in and because law enforcement in Springfield, Ohio doesn't seem to be doing anything to curb their unlawful behavior, that they've been welcomed into the United States and given carte blanche to do whatever they want.
Here's a question I've had a couple people ask me, and I'm going to ask you, drawing upon your decades of government experience. Okay, you've got everything you described in Haiti, right? These people are coming here. We know there's a large Haitian population in South Florida. Why, of all the places in the United States, does the federal government look at a map and say, Springfield, Ohio? It seems like a very odd fit for people from that part of the world.
Well, there are some people who are very cynical who would say that the government is trying to exploit this for electoral politics. And what they're doing is that they're directing a lot of these migrants to places that are red state strongholds on the belief that, one, the migrants are never going to be forced to leave the United States. Number two, they'll eventually get a path to citizenship. And number three, out of gratitude for getting this path of citizenship, they will vote for the Democrat Party. I mean, whether that's the case or not is one I think that we should probably leave to the political science professors and the sociologists. From a practical standpoint, what we're seeing now is the federal government of the United States has made a mockery out of the entire border of the U.S. And here's the real key point. They have absolutely no idea who's coming in. And do you think that you're going to be able to? I mean, I said before, and I don't mean to sound like I'm contradicting myself. You need to vet these people. Problem with a place like Haiti is that how do you vet them? Because Haiti doesn't have a functioning government, much less a record-keeping system. And it's not like you can call up the cannibal warlord and say, hey, Barbecue Jimmy, can you run some background checks on these people? So this is the type of situation that it's irresponsible of the United States government, without bothering to check any of these people and find out whatever information we can on them, to mass relocate them into the United States. I mean, there are towns in the U.S. that have well under 20,000 people. And I think the other key point to understand about Haiti is, I can't recall at this point if it was under the Clinton or the Bush administration, but we invaded Haiti because the government became so unstable. And, at this point, clearly we're not going to do that. But I don't think the solution is to relocate everyone who's unhappy about being in Haiti here, because the other thing that no one talks about is, why is Haiti falling apart right now? It's falling apart because of political squabbles and because people have different ideologies that they think the Haitian government ought to be run under. If you have a whole bunch of Haitian people and you don't know anything about them because you've just waved them into the United States, you're very likely to import the political problems that they were fighting about at home into U.S. neighborhoods. And then you wind up with migrant gang wars, which we have seen happen in a number of places in the United States.
Another element to this is that I've read some of the more sympathetic commentary in the New York Times and other establishment media places talking about how a lot of these Haitians coming here, they're skilled machinists and they got these talents that they're now working at jobs in the United States with. Couldn't a nation like Haiti use skilled workers like that? Aren't we dooming that country to an even worse future by essentially stealing their best and brightest, according to them?
Yeah, without a doubt. But I'm also going to call BS on that. I don't think a lot of these people are skilled machinists. At one point in time, Haiti was a huge manufacturing center. Most of the baseballs that were made in the United States, including the ones used in the major leagues, were manufactured in Haiti. And there was a big political dispute, I think, when I was in college about why is the great American pastime, having the balls you need for it, manufactured in Haiti, which is a foreign country, rather than doing it in the United States. But there were clothes that were manufactured there. There were sporting goods that were manufactured there. But that all died up when Haiti fell apart politically in the 90s. And after it dried up, I don't think that Haitian civil society had the capacity to train machinists or anything else at that point. So I would be shocked if any of these people have the kind of machine shop skills that are typically needed in the United States. You may have had part of the older Haitian generation that understood factory operations because they worked in factories making baseballs or sneakers or clothing. But whoever's saying that, I don't think is adequately informed about who this crowd is and what their capabilities are.
Now, you mentioned earlier about Springfield. You said somebody's going to get hurt. We're already past that because people are getting hurt there. In that same article in New York Post, they talk about how in August of last year, a 36-year-old Haitian immigrant lost control of a minivan he was driving without a valid U.S. license on a highway near Springfield and straight into the path of an oncoming school bus. The bus driver swerved to avoid the driver, went careening off the road, throwing an 11-year-old boy from a window, fatally crushing him as the vehicle rolled. 20 other kids were hospitalized. So there's someone who, if not for the fact that he's here, that incident wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at this, these charges of racism are so ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with saying somebody comes from a country where most people don't drive without a developed road system. We think they ought to have some driver education before one gives them a license in the United States. I mean, I've been to the UK, to Scotland, and I would not want to try and drive there because they drive on the left side of the road. And every time that a cabbie or bus driver started to turn into a traffic circle going the wrong way, I was like, it's just an automatic reaction because that's what's ingrained. So it's, if we expect 16-year-olds in the United States to get a learner's permit and learn how to drive, the mere fact that someone is an adult from a foreign country doesn't mean that they should be given a license here. And I recall reading about that case, and actually I had forgotten about that until you mentioned it, that somebody actually had gotten hurt. And if I'm not mistaken, that guy had a driver's license from Mexico, not from the U.S., if I recall that correctly. Now, I don't know about you, but having been to Mexico and seeing the crazy way that people drive there, I'm not so sure that I would want to trust my safety on the road to the Mexican driver's test.
And another angle of this, I said there's many angles. Another one is that people in Springfield are starting to talk now about the number of auto accidents there being caused by some of these migrants. The auto insurance rates for residents of Springfield are going way up. I saw one where a resident there was saying his premiums have skyrocketed because they said it's more dangerous to drive where you live now.
Well, I mean, if you look at this from an economic standpoint, and this is putting aside the whole foolish debate that Early has been a part of in a lot of different cases of whether we should give illegal aliens driver's licenses because that'll make the roads safer. Just put that aside for a moment. Look at this purely in a dollar signs way. Yes, auto insurance is going to go up. if there are burglaries and break-ins and thefts of anything from household goods to farm equipment, people's homeowners insurance is going to go up. If that's an agricultural area, the farmer's insurance is going to go up. And, the costs of healthcare, policing, fire protection, things like that are inevitably going to go up, because if you have a bunch of people who come here with absolutely no ability to speak English, poverty-stricken, and with a questionable set of marketable job skills, who is going to wind up paying for those people when they need assistance, when they need food stamps, when they need shelter and they get housing benefits, and when they need medical care? It's the American taxpayer. So this increases the cost of everything for the federal taxpayer, but also for the residents of Springfield, Ohio.
So, Matt, we would be remiss to wrap this topic up without talking about an incident that took place a couple years ago in Texas. Some border agents who were on horses got into an incident with some Haitian migrants, as it turns out, that were down there. Refresh our memory, what happened there?
So there was a group of Haitian migrants that had waded across the Rio Grande and then had surged the fence along the border, because that was at one of the points where there had been no wall constructed yet. I think it was near Eagle Pass, Texas. There were Border Patrol agents there. The Border Patrol has a mounted unit, very skilled horsemen that use horses to access the backcountry and also use horses for riot control when it's necessary. And they had a situation where the Haitians were told that they could not enter the U.S. without going through the proper process, and then they attempted to rush the border. And so when they did, the Border Patrol individual on the scene, who was in command of the whole incident, gave an order for the mounted unit officers to try and force back some of the individuals before a riot broke out. Now, one of the things about the Border Patrol mounted unit is it's not one of these units with these British saddles and all of this kind of stuff. They use Western cowboy equipment. And I've known a couple of guys that were on the unit over the years. A lot of them started out as rodeo cowboys. So they do something that anybody who's familiar with Western riding of a certain type will understand. They use the reins to control the horse, and they twirl them on one side or the other, and will slap the withers of the horse with the reins as a means of giving signals to the horse. So the horse understands if it's catching in its peripheral vision the rein turning on one side, it'll move to that side, or the horse will perform some kind of function that it's trained to do. Well, the anti-borders pro-illegal alien contingent got a hold of this and accused the Border Patrol of being racist and whipping the migrants. And Ali Mayorkas, who I'm sure you know my feelings on Ali Mayorkas.
Who's he again? I don't remember him. What does he do?
Ali Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, who has the moral compass of a death camp guard, really not an impressive individual, nor is he particularly consistent. He acts politically and does whatever he thinks needs to be done to prove whatever narrative it is that he's pushing at a given point. Immediately, without any investigation, fell on this whole thing and publicly accused the Border Patrol of whipping migrants and called it a horrible racist incident. The only problem is somebody had sent him an email before he went and did the press conference deriding the Border Patrol and told him that that is not what happened at all. And the email was backed up by at least one, possibly more journalists who were on the scene and said, no, they weren't whipping anybody. This is ridiculous. It's been misrepresented. I think the fundamental point there is that a lot of times when people who are not familiar with immigration law and who haven't had a lot of exposure to migrants hear about migrants, they get the Disney It's a Small World version. And everybody is part of the poor, tired, huddled mass yearning to breathe free. And that's not the reality. The reality is that migrants are people like anyone else. There's good, there's bad. And a lot of migrants get sucked into a crowd mentality. So when they're, it's been proven again and again by psychologists that crowds behave differently than individuals would on their own. And so when you have a bunch of people who have just had a difficult trip to the United States and have waded a river in which a lot of people drowned trying to get to the U.S. and gotten to the shore, you can understand how they would behave potentially in a way that is dangerous, particularly if you have criminals and troublemakers inserted into their midst. So, this was a classic example of Ali Mayorkas portraying all the migrants as poor, downtrodden, simple victims, and the Border Patrol as evil, jackbooted thugs. And this is one of the issues that people have with Secretary Mayorkas is he's about backing the people who are violating American law, not backing the law enforcement employees who work for him. And if you've ever worked in an environment like that, it's terrible because you constantly feel that everything you do as an effort to enforce the law is going to be undermined and second-guessed by your supervisors.
A couple other points to add about that incident as we covered it at the time. The furor largely came from one still photograph that was published.
Yes.
And if you didn't know the context and you just strictly took it off the image you saw, you might say, well, gee, maybe he could have been doing what they accused him of. The photographer who took the picture came forward and said, that's not what happened. And that's how it eventually got to Mayorkas, that it was a completely fraudulent accusation that he went with anyway. Joe Biden similarly went before television cameras and said, it's horrible how these agents were strapping these migrants, and he vowed they will pay. And these agents had their lives turned upside down over what was a completely false allegation.
That is a very important point, and I think over and above that, people also have to understand when you're a law enforcement officer on a horse wading into a crowd, that's dangerous. So even if a Border Patrol agent had slapped a migrant with the reins, if the migrant, say, was attempting to pull him off his horse, then that's a use of force incident, and it has to be investigated by the law enforcement agency to determine whether that person hit somebody and assaulted them or whether it was a legitimate protective use of force for a law enforcement officer. And, of course, none of that took place. And, it's very easy if you've never been in or around law enforcement to presume that everything happens like it does on TV. But in the real world, it's not like that. Sometimes the interactions are violent, and migrants can be very violent. They've had a huge problem with people throwing rocks at Border Patrol agents. I think there's been at least one Border Patrol agent killed by people throwing rocks. There's been a couple who were permanently severely handicapped because of getting hit in the head with rocks. There's been Border Patrol agents shot and left in the desert. All kinds of crazy stuff like that. It's a dangerous job, and I think we owe it to the people who keep the U.S. safe from terrorists, drug dealers, and other public safety threats to at least presume them innocent and give them a fair hearing before everybody jumps on them.
I always thought that image that created the controversy was something of a Rorschach test of America, where if you're grounded in common sense and you have a sense of law and order, you look at that image and you see our country's descended into chaos because these guys are trying to make order and there's disorder everywhere and they're not being supported by their bosses. They're being thrown under the bus, actually. If you're of the mind that the 1830s was last week and we've still got chattel slavery going on in this country, you look at that picture and say, oh, that guy, he's like an overseer at a plantation or something. And you had the predictable gaggle of people like Maxine Waters and Joy Reid from MSNBC talking about how dare they use bullwhips on those migrants. And someone pointed out, the Border Patrol has not issued bullwhips. It just got so ridiculous.
Well, it did. And then on top of that, this is the thing that always kills me about the racial discussions. If you've ever spent any time around the Border Patrol, there's a huge number of Hispanic officers who, according to the racial identity police in the United States at the current time, Hispanics are not Caucasians, even though they used to be. I've never been able to figure that one out. But, when I worked for the Immigration and Naturalization Service and later for ICE and for USCIS, it was like the Rainbow Coalition in the offices. And what was shocking to me was that there were so many people who were immigrants themselves or from immigrant families who said, oh, this is one of the first things I saw when I came to the United States. This looks cool. I wonder if I can do that for a living. And then wound up doing that for a living.
Yeah. So, transitioning to another recent outrageous story, Aurora, Colorado, we saw these images coming from an apartment complex there with these Tren de Aragua gangsters wreaking mayhem in the complex. What's your take on what's going on with them?
Well, my first take on it was watching that. If that had happened in any other context, there would have been a SWAT team or the FBI hostage rescue team treating that as an incident with barricaded suspects and assaulting the building to arrest the bad guys and take their weapons away. But because this involves migrants, for some reason, nobody wants to touch it. The other thing that immediately sprung to mind is the anti-borders pro-illegal alien faction hates it when we refer to what's going on as an invasion. That looked an awful lot like an invasion to me. Those guys moving through, one of them with a rifle and the other one's armed with a pistol, looked remarkably like footage I have seen of U.S. and other coalition troops moving through apartment buildings in places like Baghdad and clearing the building. So, what happened to these guys? Did law enforcement go into that building and say, enough, this is over? No, they saturated the nearby area, and I think they wound up arresting somebody in at least one, but possibly two or three other apartment buildings nearby. But this apparently is a Tren de Aragua thing where they go into an area and they either set up a protection racket if it's not in apartment buildings, or if it's in apartment buildings, you pay rent. And some of the coverage of this said that the gang people were so brazen, they approached the owners of the buildings and said, if you're having trouble collecting rent, we'll get it for you, but you got to give us a take. So this is, importing this group into the United States. It's starting to get like things that you saw in like The Godfather, in like movies about the mob in the New York City, in the New York City area in the 1920s. And it's frightening to see. I mean, I found that footage to be, I've seen a lot of disturbing stuff working in immigration over the years, but that was possibly the most disturbing piece of footage that I've ever seen, because that represents a complete breakdown in civil order and a complete loss of control by government authorities. You had an armed invader occupying a U.S. apartment building, and the U.S. government and the state and local governments that sit under the U.S. government were either unwilling or unable to do anything about it.
Now, as a result of that, because the public outrage was building when that story broke, a member of the Aurora City Council was trying to alert people to what's going on. The open borders governor of Colorado came in and gaslit everyone and said, oh, that's a figment of her imagination. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And then shortly thereafter, a couple activist groups came out, had pre-printed signs that gave them to the occupants of the apartment complex who protested and said, that's not what's going on here. Tren de Aragua is not here. Oh, is that just more gaslighting?
Yeah, it's more gaslighting, but it's also fear. So most of the people living in that apartment building were migrants of one stripe or another. And so this points up everything that is a problem with the whole approach the Biden administration has taken. So you admit massive numbers of people. They wind up living together in these balkanized neighborhoods because they want to be around something or someone familiar and be able to communicate with people. The next thing you know, organized crime comes in and starts taking advantage of that. And so the people out there protesting saying, oh, this isn't going on. One, you're 100% right. They were organized by a knee-jerk anti-immigration enforcement organization. But the reason that they're susceptible to that is these people are in a position where they don't want to be seen on television going, yeah, this is terrible, and then have Tren de Aragua kill them and their children in their sleep in the apartment building that they're now lording over. And number two, these people are in a dubious legal limbo that the Biden administration intentionally created when it waved all these people in here. And a lot of them are betting that if they stay here long enough, there's going to be an amnesty or there's going to be some other way for them to become legalized. And so they're afraid to say anything because they think that ICE is going to come for the Tren de Aragua people and then arrest all of them. And in all honesty, there would be nothing wrong with ICE doing that because ICE's job is to find people who are violating the U.S. immigration laws and then arrest them and subject them to the legal process. But this is the kind of ridiculous, crazy, repetitive circle, like a broken old school record player that we've gotten into. And there doesn't seem to be any effort coming from Washington at the current time to go, maybe this has gone too far and we have a problem.
Speaking of ridiculous and crazy, if you looked at the media coverage of this, it's really a sad statement on how corrupt our corporate media is because they couldn't resist putting their own spin on it to make it look like all these people are just misunderstood peasants and what you see with your eyes clearly is not what's really happening. So you have to go to alternate media. You have to go to Twitter, X, things like that. And we found out from following those outlets and platforms, this is going on elsewhere. We've got almost the identical situation happening in Chicago,
Yes.
where we had what looked like a member of a local gang issuing a warning to Tren de Aragua that if you come here and continue doing this, you're going to have to deal with us. So now we have the threat of shooting in the streets, rival gangs duking it out for turf in Chicago. And then just today, we found this on X. Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua have reportedly taken over a hotel in El Paso, Texas. I guess that shouldn't come as a surprise. That's right on the border. So this is not a regional thing. This is not just an Aurora thing. They're branching out all over the country.
Well, this is why you have to be careful of who you let into the U.S. and what country they're coming from. Venezuela has a Marxist government right now. It's a totalitarian government. Opposition political leaders have been fleeing the country and seeking asylum elsewhere. There's one thing that we know. Everybody that has studied totalitarian governments knows this. If you have a society, you have crime. And it doesn't matter how totalitarian you are, you're still going to have crime. But what do totalitarian leaders do? They exploit the criminals. They bring the criminals in. They tell them, listen, we can line you all up against the wall and shoot you, or you can act as enforcers for us. So the fact is, we don't know, if Tren de Aragua is vicious enough to be able to operate under a totalitarian police state, we don't know how they're going to behave. We're seeing evidence of it now, but we don't know what lengths they'll go to in a free society. The other thing we don't know about these folks is how many of them are intelligence agents? How many of these are people that were co-opted by the Venezuelan government? And the Venezuelan government said, go to America, you can leave with our blessing. So, this is just craziness. But when you have violent invasions and essentially imprisonment of people in an apartment building in the United States, there's something wrong, because that's something that you associate with Beirut or the Gaza Strip or Eastern Europe during the Balkan Wars. It's not something that you think about in Chicago, El Paso, or Colorado.
Yeah. It should also be noted that sometimes people see these stories and they say, well, that's what they have coming because the sanctuary communities bring all these people in and then this is the result. However, it should be noted, Aurora is decidedly not a sanctuary community. Nearby Denver is, as we've articulated with their third worst sanctuary mayor in the country, Michael Johnston. So you've got a situation now where these big sanctuary cities are engaging in all this nonsense, these sanctuary policies that are a huge magnet. It's spilling over into the nearby communities, many of whom are not sanctuary, and yet they have to pay the price for it.
Well, the sanctuary jurisdictions are run by clowns. I mean, Maura Healey in Massachusetts, Eric Adams in New York, the mayor of Chicago. These people are hypocrites because they virtue signal out of one side of their mouth, And then when a bunch of migrants show up in their jurisdictions who they were planning to welcome with open arms, and those individuals start to create problems, then they start busing these people elsewhere. Of course, in the first instance when that happened, when it was Governor DeSantis and Governor Abbott doing that, they thought it was a terrible thing. So this just shows you the level of self-contradiction and hypocrisy that these people will engage in. I mean, if you look at the example in Massachusetts, one of the sheriffs in Texas decided that he wanted to file charges against Ron DeSantis for kidnapping and false imprisonment because he put migrants who were asked, where do you want to go, on a chartered flight and took them to the luxury location of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. And of course, Martha's Vineyard, which is overloaded with virtue signaling, anti-borders, pro-illegal alien advocates, had them show up in their pristine little bedroom community Escape. And what happened? Well, they were promptly shuttled onto the ferry and then housed in a barracks on a military base in Cape Cod. So this is just the kind of craziness. They want these people when they can find that human interest story of the poor downtrodden individual who came here and was in a tough status and in legal limbo, but they got a scholarship to Harvard and to Johns Hopkins Medical School, and now they're a brain surgeon. That's great, and that does happen on occasion, but it's a small minority of people who are migrants. And frankly, I don't think anybody from Tren de Aragua, or for that matter, most of Venezuela and most of the other places that people are coming from, are going to be the individual who cures cancer in the United States. So this absurdist attitude that we have to put up with all the crime and the rape and pillaging so that we don't miss the one Sergey Brin or Elon Musk, it just doesn't comport with reality.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Immigration Reform Law Institute, go to irli.org. If you found this information useful and you'd like to support the show, go to irli.org/podcast. You can also hear this show on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and Spotify. And don't forget to check us out on all the major social media platforms. Thanks again.